Hello and welcome to another episode of Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. I am delighted today to be joined by Nadia Sood. Nadia, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited for the conversation.
Great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us. And listen, CreditEnable is a fantastic company, multi-award winning. We've seen so much press around you guys at the moment and everything you've been doing and how it's been progressing. But for those who are tuning in who maybe haven't heard of the business so far, can you give us a bit of the background and a bit of your story, please?
Sure. So just a little bit about me. I'm actually the daughter of an entrepreneur. I grew up in a small business, later became a private equity investor, but that small business understanding never left me. And in my career as a private equity investor, I was investing in huge projects around the world. And we were generally always having to finance SMEs because banks just found it too expensive and too time consuming to underwrite those loans in a quick and efficient manner, which left SMEs in an uncomfortable position that they had to sort of go into the informal market and find friends, family, money lenders to lend to them, or rely on the corporate partners or investor partners that they worked with, which was in some cases us. And it struck me that there was a huge inefficiency in the market that could be addressed by technology, that the reason lenders were not lending to SMEs, the formal financial institutions were not lending, was not because they didn't want to, not because those SMEs were not creditworthy, but because the process of lending was so complex and so costly. And just like Bloomberg entered the bond market with the Bloomberg solution and turned a very opaque, sort of dysfunctional market that didn't work very quickly or very efficiently for either party into something that was streamlined, smooth, transparent, and allowed people to transact quickly, making it more attractive also to institutional investors. We thought we could do that in the SME credit market by bringing technology into the fore and creating a bridge between lenders and borrowers so that everything could flow fast, everything could flow efficiently, and most importantly, the risk for both parties would be reduced. And so that's really what we're about, creating a bridge between borrower and lender that makes them able to transact at the best price on the best terms for both of them at the same time.
This has been, with exactly what you're talking about there, has never been a more important time for SMEs and probably the services you're providing. How's COVID-19 and everything that's been happening with the pandemic impacted the business for you guys?
So obviously it's had a huge strain on SMEs globally. And, just to give you some stats, because I always like to talk about numbers, the global market for SME credit in terms of money that sits on formal financial institutions' balance sheets ready to be deployed is $8.5 trillion every year. Wow. $4.5 trillion of that before COVID wasn't getting dispersed to creditworthy SMEs just because of the time and complication involved. Yeah. So you can imagine it's not gotten simpler with COVID for that money to get deployed. And obviously there's been a huge strain on SMEs. But I think this is the opportunity now for technology really to help address this issue. And so what we've seen in our business is actually we saw a 600 times increase in requests for debt from SMEs coming into us. And we were seeing lots of SMEs who might have been slightly more reticent earlier to involve themselves in a digital interaction, becoming much more digitally savvy quickly because they didn't have an option. If they were locked down physically, which a lot of our customers in India were completely locked down, they couldn't go to their bank or talk to their bank manager in the way they did it before. So they had to find another alternative. And they're nimble, so they do. So we saw a huge increase in demand from borrowers, but we also had a lot more lenders coming to us saying we need help because we can't interact in the same way we did before with our clients. We still need to lend. How can we find them? How can we triage through them quickly? How can we make sure we don't have to take even a longer time to let them know something because we can't meet them? So we've been seeing increased demand on both sides from lenders and from borrowers, which has been fantastic for us, obviously, and especially because we're all about trying to help people as a partner. So if we can assist both sides and everyone's winning, then we've really met our KPI as a business.
It's really clear for me as that KPI. Look, people took the buzzword at the moment is the why, isn't it? Purpose-led businesses and such like. And you guys are very much around that. You said just right at the very start of this, your story is the daughter of an entrepreneur and such like, and seeing this whole story of journey play out. the SME world is something you're incredibly passionate about.
Yeah.
And as you say, we've seen, I think, an awful lot of evolution in this. Look, I've been talking all the way through this series about the sort of positives, to take from the negative of this. Tell us a little bit about how you've seen this sort of evolve a little bit, and what some of the legacy will be for the SME world, and particularly with their relationship with banks afterwards, because we've seen a lot of change there, right?
Yeah, so I think what's firstly clear is that if you didn't have a digital presence before as an SME, you got to get one quick. And it's really important because that's the way you can reach out to your customers. It's also the way of sort of enhancing your credibility with a potential lender so that they can actually find you. You know, there you are, they can see the traffic, they can understand you better. And they need to be able to rely on those sorts of metrics now more than they did before, because they can't actually possibly go, they might not be able to go visit your shop anymore. They might not be able to bring you into the branch to talk to you. So I think digitization for SMEs is going to be super important. And we also try to help them with that, understand how do you get yourself onto Facebook? How do you use Google? How do you just become more digitally savvy as a business? On the lender side, obviously, lenders are going to have to invest a lot more in digital customer journeys, and they're going to have to work more with intermediaries who are good at that. So to me, I've always seen us as a disruptor, but in a positive way that's a partner disruptor rather than a disruptor who's trying to cannibalize the bank's business. We really want to work with banks because banks are actually quite good at dispersing loans, underwriting loans, and of course, recovering on loans. And utilizing the strengths that they have and partnering with them to get to the customer and helping the customer understand them helps to fill the gap between what used to be there with the relationship manager and just isn't there anymore. So how do you emulate that through a digital journey? And that's what we really excel at, taking the customer, the SME, all the way through the process in a curated manner so they can understand, what do I need to give the lender now so that he can say yes and move me forward? Why should I prepare my accounts in that manner? Well, it's because this is what the lender's going to look at when they need to underwrite the loan. So providing that education and the step-by-step guidance all the way through, but fully digitized so that it's efficient for everybody. So everyone gets to be more empowered, more knowledgeable, more enabled, and everything's happening faster.
That sort of speed of evolution of digitalization, so so to speak, has been one of the absolute features of this. How, and we keep on talking about this, about how quickly we're seeing things evolve within that for the better, right? You spoke there about post-crisis and relationship managers being moved out, and I don't think the banks have ever really sort of caught up with that in the SME world of how you replace in the new world. And this gives us a great opportunity, right? As you're saying, with the intermediaries being able to come in there and positively disrupt and provide that sort of user journey, which has become, since Amazon in particular, and general digitalization, everyone has got such higher expectations of what they should be receiving as a service. And I think it's really interesting to see how you can help with that.
Absolutely. So SMEs are no different to consumers, right? They're used to having an iPhone. It gets you where you want to go. It knows everything about you. It knows when you go to the loo. They're used to having a service that's quite intuitive, rapid, speedy. So why shouldn't that be the case also in banking? And I think there's a huge opportunity to deliver that level of service to customers. And the great thing about SMEs is that the lifetime value of an SME customer is huge, because they start off with an account, then they need treasury, then they need export finance, then they need all sorts of things. So the number of services you can bring to them grows exponentially as they grow, as opposed to a consumer who really is only going to ever need, just durable consumer loans and mortgage. There's a limit to how many products you can provide them. So if banks get to understand this, there is a huge opportunity, and we're here to help them. But it's true, as you said, that they are struggling with this. I mean, it's very saddening to see, for example, that Metro Bank and some of the other UK banks have actually returned the remedy fund money that the UK government gave them to lend to SMEs, because they're finding it too expensive to lend to business clients and too risky or too complicated. Well, if there was a customer journey that was there and you could get to them quickly and understand them quickly, you probably wouldn't have had to return those funds. So, again, the opportunity is for those who seize the opportunity, who say, yeah, let's go and build a digital customer journey. Let's bring the SME into the consumer world. We'll all reap the benefits. And more than anything, who's going to reap the benefits is the economy. I mean, in the UK, like 60% of or more jobs are created by SMEs. We can't let them fail. We have to get them credit. We've got to get them debt. We've got to help them start back. Same thing in India. These are every single country, the GDP creation comes from SMEs. The job creation comes from SMEs. We cannot not lend to them. We must lend to them. You know?
Yeah. I think that's so important. And I think when you know, going back to the the whole digital piece, there was an article I read this morning, and I've literally just got it here with me. I'm going to tell you the number of clicks to create an account, and I don't know where this research comes from, but you look at the newer environments like Revolut at 24 clicks, Starling Bank at 38 clicks, Monzo at 45, and it goes all the way through to 99 for an HSBC, 91 for a Santander, First Direct at 120. It's exactly what you're talking about, isn't it? About how we're adapting. And when you look at the top of that list with Revolut, with Starling Bank and Monzo, these are the people who are really challenging the market and doing some amazing things at the moment, right? And I think the more we can look at that and say, right, how does this then come through to support the SMEs is a fascinating sort of state of play for us to be in. I also love businesses that are sort of there and adding to their community at the moment. I think you guys have been doing some really interesting things as well with regards to your We Move Forward movement. Tell us a little bit about how you've been helping through that as well.
Yeah, so we realized very quickly on, obviously by talking to all of our customers on a daily basis, that they were under strain. They were confused, for example, about what was available to them in terms of support, but also struggling to understand, how is my business going to survive this period of time? I know where I was at before, how able am I or ready am I to be able to get through this? So what we did was we quickly created like basically a free financial health check for SMEs. They can come onto our website. They go through a very quick questionnaire. It's probably not even 3 or 4 clicks. Fill out a little bit of information, and we can immediately tell them what position they're in right now, whether they're weak in terms of the way they're running their business, whether they're adequate or whether they're strong. And then we can tell them how much working capital they should be able to avail of. And then we can help them get that loan. So the whole process is about not just getting you debt necessarily to help you keep the business going or help you expand, because lots of people also have been found themselves in a situation of abundance, meaning they might have been producing like PPE equipment and trucking along at a certain rate, and suddenly their product is like 1,000 times more in demand than it was before. So they need working capital, obviously, or expansion capital. So how do we help them get that? So the We Move Forward idea was all about the fact that in history, we've lived through big crises before. We've all gone through that, and eventually we do move forward. And why can't we try to help SMEs move forward faster? So get them the best understanding of themselves possible for free. And then if they are able to absorb debt, because we also don't want to in-debt people who can't absorb it, we will help them get a loan. So that's the idea behind We Move Forward, and very excited that lots of SMEs are taking it up and we're getting to help them.
So that sort of agility, I think, is a feature of companies who've done really well through all of this. Businesses there who are looking at problems and rapidly providing solutions to their customers' issues. Tell us a little bit about how you sort of approach that and where that sort of maybe some of the challenges around that being agile enough to sort of turbocharge that sort of thing, because it's not been, whilst it feels like we've been in isolation for a long time now, it's not actually about being that long a period to sort of create, programs like that to help as much as you have been.
Yeah, so I guess you're absolutely right. I mean, agility is so important, and being able to respond to the situation. So, we've seen certain players in the space continue to just behave as though the way they were before. And, I always like to use this quote of Einstein, which is like, the definition of insanity is like you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Well, we're in an unprecedented time, so we have to respond differently. And so, what we've done is just kind of amplified what we normally do. On every single day, we're talking to customers and we're understanding and they tell us a lot because we're an intermediary. They actually are quite candid with us about what their issues are, what they're struggling with, what their aspirations and hopes are. We get to hear a lot from on the ground. And so we took all of that insight and wrapped it into a product that was like, here, let's help you move forward. And so what we're trying to do is just be like agile, even in our development, that when we hear something happening in the market, we start to agilely develop a small little widget that we can use that will help people with that issue, so that we're really responsive and they feel like, hey, when I talk to this company, they're hearing me, and then they're acting on it and they're helping me. So yeah, absolutely. I think that agility factor is so critical, and that's where, you know, nimble startups can have a real competitive advantage.
Absolutely. And tell us, look, there's with all of that sort of positivity, there's been a completely new way of working for businesses. And you say, look, it's a business here which is a smaller company, which is sometimes more difficult to steer than a larger ship. Tell us how you've coped as a team, as a unit with everything that's been going on.
Yeah, so we actually sent our team in India and our team in the UK home much before the official lockdown started. So that actually was gave us a big leg up, because we kind of worked out the kinks around working from home before we actually really had to. I think that also really boosted employee morale, because they knew that they were safe. They weren't needing to worry. Everybody had health insurance. In India, where people were, you know, imagine traveling on public transportation in Mumbai with millions of people, where, you know, risk of catching the virus is very high. You know, they were really happy that they were at home. And then we were on the phone a lot to each other, and we use Zoom a lot, of course. And in certain meetings, we insist that people actually are on camera. And it's not because we're trying to check up on what they're doing, but it's actually so that we can feel connected, because that's the big challenge, really. It's the lack of ability to connect, which is hard, right? It does grate on people's morale. It does grate on their mental health. And so we're trying to keep people positive by, you know, telling jokes, seeing each other physically, at least on Zoom, you know, teasing one another, and trying to be together as much as we can, right? So, yeah.
It's been amazing how people have adapted to Zoom, and thank God for it. Huh? It's been a savior.
Well, yeah, and in some ways you get to know things about people you wouldn't otherwise. Like we've been having sort of weekly jokes, and one of our team members, who's quite quiet normally, sort of silently came up with a joke and was like, this guy was asked by his boss to come into work, and it was a Sunday, and he said, oh, it's gonna be hard for me, the trains are running a bit late, I'll be a bit delayed. And the boss was like, okay, well, how long do you think you'll be delayed by? Like, will you get here this evening? And he was like, well, I'll probably get there by Monday. And we were like, oh wow, we didn't know you had such a great sense of humor.
It sort of removes the curtain a little bit, doesn't it, with it all? And I think it's the other bits of just trying to get to know everyone, you know, full stop, and seeing what's going on around them on the pitches, and meeting the families and all this sort of stuff. There's a lot to take away from it as well. Yeah. What do you think the future will look like? So are you guys planning I'm not sure of the situation in India at the moment, but obviously we're starting to ease lockdown step by step over here as well. What's the future look like for you guys? When you anticipate, if you were early to get people out, I imagine you're going to be late to get people back, or you're going to be early to get people back. What's your thoughts on all of that?
I think we're taking a very cautious approach, and, you know, we're really just evaluating the situation. We've had zero slowdown by all of us being at home, because we're a tech company. Sure. And in fact, you know, we've been intermediating, we've been talking to all of our lender clients every day and all of our borrower clients every day. So there's really been no slowdown. And I'm keen to keep people safe. So I think we'll be very prudent about when and if people go back to work. And which functions go back, and, you know, how we protect people as they're traveling to and fro. In terms of the future, I think, you know, it's such an interesting time to see how we're going to be able to evolve ourselves as a human race and address this challenge in the way we can. And I think we have to, as a society, focus on the SME segment. We've got to get operational plans in all countries that go way more into detail than the big macro level stimulus plans do. Because what we see, you know, we've seen this in the UK, we've seen this in India, you know, big stimulus packages are good, you know, cash needs to get into the economy, but then it becomes the operational questions sometimes are stymieing these things from actually getting to anybody, right? Like, if nobody knows, if the banks don't know how to deploy the capital, then how do SMEs eventually even get it? If the regulation remains exactly the same as it was before COVID, so for example, in India, they were demanding that people still present themselves physically for KYC to get the loan, but the whole country is on lockdown. So how can you present for KYC? You know, we need to adapt our operational modality to the times and help the financial institutions to be more nimble through the regulation. So one of the things we're obviously talking to governments about a lot is, how can you operationally take the stimulus package and then make it get to people who really need it. What do you need to do to help the banks? What do you need to do to help the borrowers? How do you make it happen? The nitty gritty detail of making it happen. And I think the players who are going to really succeed are the ones who can use technology with empathy to talk to people and help them through the journey. And I'm so keen on this concept of empathetic technology, using technology with empathy, because nobody wants a world, and I think this has taught us so much now today from COVID, is that nobody wants a world where we're socially disconnected. Yes, we want to be physically distant because we don't want to be exposed, but we don't want to be socially distant. And technology needs to help us not be socially distant, right? Help us feel closer, be closer.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And it becomes the responsibility of a leader in your position to make sure that everyone is, connected and the well-being of everyone's been so important. Staying on that theme of you as a leader, that you're navigating an international business through uncharted territories at the moment. Tell us some of the things that have been not keeping you up, but what have been some of the things that you've been most aware of, been most concerned to get right?
So I think the whole idea of your business plan, you have to really, really reevaluate that. And you have to be reevaluating it every day, right? It's like, do you take a contrarian position? Do you do different things to people in the market? Do you do the same as everyone else? I've seen a bifurcation of activity between a group of companies that have just basically decided, like, this is so scary and overwhelming, I'm just not going to do anything, and I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And another group of companies who have been very aggressive about taking up opportunities because they realize that, hey, I might get a greater share of voice here, I might get greater mind space share talking to senior executives. We've taken the latter approach. So in behind the scenes, we've lined up several very large partnerships, one of which will be with Experian, and other very large corporate entities where lots of SMEs aggregate around those. So we've been really actively working on the fact that this is an opportunity to build the business even further. But I think, it's the big learning for me has been, like, whatever I thought was going to happen, I just have to throw it all out the window and start again and think, what do I do now? And how do I manage now? And how do I think, and how do I also think, I have a great mentor and gave me some very good advice at the beginning of the lockdown period, when he was like, you cannot think 180 days ahead. You have to think in chunks of 15 days maximum. Will I be able to generate growth in the next 15 days, in the next 30 days, in the next 60 days? One, it helps you as a leader not get too overwhelmed by the daunting, uncertainty, right? And you can't be too overwhelmed because otherwise your team gets too overwhelmed. So you have to be positive. The second thing is, I think he's actually quite right in terms of no one really knows what the world's going to be like in 180 days. So why plan for that?
No one knows what it's going to be like next week, to be fair.
Exactly. So if you can just go forward the next 15 days and your metrics are going this way rather than this way, you're doing well.
Yeah. So absolutely right. I love that advice. It's and I think it's so important to have, you mentioned a mentor there. I think and one of the things we've been trying to do throughout this series is speak to people who are going through this, who've been doing well, and sort of sharing that advice. That you've had some great advice there. If you were to give one or two bits of advice to people who are watching at the moment, what would be your things to pass on?
So I would definitely say that one day at a time approach is so critical. Secondly, I would definitely talk to your investors. They are understanding. They invested in you for a reason. They also get that the world has gone topsy-turvy. So they're not going to be surprised that things have slowed or changed. And they can help. And I've been so fortunate to have such supportive investors who have been working with the business day to day, helping us, manage strategic questions, issues, talking to us regularly, and even investing more in the business during COVID. So talk to your investors. And then the third thing I think is really try to see what opportunities there are for your specific business to deliver something new and innovative, because people are also looking for hopeful interventions. If you can hit on the one thing for your particular consumer set, which would give them that hopeful intervention, chances are they'll lock onto it, and they'll become even more loyal to you. So just like we try to talk to our lenders daily, our borrowers daily, trying to think about what further interventions could we introduce that would just make their life easier right now. And that gets you a very loyal client base for sure. So those would be my 3 top tips.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of those. I think, you know, particularly that piece there about making sure, and we've seen so many different examples. I think actually, you know, one of the sort of key features for me about the sector we're in, the fintech sector, has been the sort of work that brands and teams have done to ensure that there is, you know, what's being called goodwill equity, I think is the new word that people are using within it. And I think that sort of feature is going to be so important moving forward to you know, to companies out there and how they can continue to thrive. So look, I really appreciate you sharing that.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about purpose-led businesses, and I think that's also going to come much more to the fore. Like, what's the business really about, and what's it trying to do that's broader than just itself? And I think that is going to be the dominant theme for the next probably 10 years, because people have realized that the environment has suffered, we have suffered, our relationships have suffered, businesses have suffered. So people who are going into the market without a purpose and purely on the basis of a commercial driver, I think are going to suffer.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think, you know, what you're doing and where you're in, and that purpose you're driving is a fantastic purpose, and, you know, so it brings real hope and opportunity for the SME sector. With regards to you yourselves, it's been an amazing story so far. Tell us a few of the highlights of what we can expect to hear from CreditEnable and everything you guys are going to be doing over the next 180 days and beyond.
So obviously we're ramping up our activities significantly. We launched We Move Forward, which is attracting lots more SMEs who are looking for support. We're also looking at new product offers for SMEs directly to help them better understand their own position, and obviously looking at onboarding more lender partners and more strategic partners, you know, who are big aggregators of SMEs, so e-commerce platforms, others, where SMEs congregate and where they also need access to capital that's affordable.
Amazing.
So stay tuned for much more on this front.
It certainly sounds worthwhile doing that. It's I think it's an amazing business. I think what you're doing is such a valuable asset to, you know, to people out there. For people who've listened to this and thinking, right, you know, I'm an SME who this resonates with in particular, how best to get in touch with you?
So in the UK, you can get in touch with us via our website, www.creditenable.com. In India, it's the same, www.creditenable.in. And you can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Fantastic. Well, I hope people do reach out for you. It seems like some wonderful stuff that you're doing at the moment. Thanks so much for sharing the story and coming on and joining us today. Thanks so much for everything you're doing full stop out there at the moment. And thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I'm very pleased to have been here.
Great stuff. Thanks for joining us.